There was a man in Mecca, one of the most important people in Mecca. One day, probably he seems to be physically tired, fatigued. We don't know really what he was doing, but he seemed to be tired. He comes to Al-Kaaba. Comes to Al-Kaaba, to what they call Al-Hijr. You know, this arch. Okay, that's part of Al-Kaaba. So he has this place for him usually where he rests. He's one of the important people in Mecca, important personalities. So he takes a nap. During his nap, he hears a voice. And the voice tells him, احفر طيبة. Dig out طيبة. طيبة means good, something good. He wakes up, he doesn't know what that means. What's this voice? And dig out طيبة. What's طيبة? So he asks what طيبة, but the voice doesn't seem to respond. So when he wakes up, he feels there's something weird about this dream, about this voice that he heard in his dream, but he doesn't know what to do with it. So he decides to ignore it. The following day, he takes nap at the same place. And by the way, that was a habit for him. The same voice comes back to him and says, احفر برا. So he asks, what's barra? But the voice doesn't respond to him. So he wakes up again and he says, barra also means something good, something clean and righteous. But he doesn't figure out, so what's this barra? He doesn't understand it. Third day, same thing. Same voice comes to him and says, احفر Zam Zam. احفر Zam Zam. So he says, what's Zam Zam? But now the Arabs have a history of Zam Zam. They know there used to be in Mecca, there was a well called Zam Zam. They knew this. They knew this. But the well dried. It dried out and there was no water in it anymore. And the traces of the well were lost. No one knows where it was. Well, they know roughly it was around Al-Kaaba, but they couldn't find it. So it was lost. So he says, what's Zam Zam? So the voice describes to him what Zam Zam is. And I don't remember the exact narration, but it says basically, احفر زمزم عند نقرة الغراب الأعصم عند بيت النمل بين الفرث والدم لا تذم ولا تزم أو ولا تزم. Okay, basically dig out Zamzam. It's by the colony of the ants, close to that, where the crow comes around and hits with its beak, and this Zamzam, it never dries out for good, and it's never like there's nothing bad about it. Now this is a description that is clear for the locals in Mecca. Meccans know what this place is. So he wakes up, he goes and he calls on his only son at the time. He had a son called Al Harith. So he brings Al Harith, a young man. They bring their tools. They start digging in that spot. A while later, as they were digging, water comes out. Water comes out. It comes out and they see the borders or the small wall against the well. The borders of the well. The old well. When they see that, they recognize this is Zam Zam. They know Zam Zam was the well of our father Ismail. He's the father of the people of Quraysh, their father, their ancestors. So when he says this, he says Allahu Akbar. Was he Muslim? No, Allahu Akbar. The Arabs used to say Allahu Akbar because they worshipped Allah. They worshipped Allah, but they associated partners with Allah in worship. So they would devote some worship to these partners, like al-asnam, the idols. So, but they worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They knew Allah was there. They knew Allah was the creator. But the problem was they associated these asnam, these statues which represent righteous people. They worshipped them besides Allah, basically making dua to them, thinking that they can help them, offering sacrifices to them. And we know that this is shirk. This is polytheism. And that was their main problem. So he said, Allahu Akbar. Now when this man says Allah, anyone has figured out who I'm talking about now? Abdul Muttalib. Abdul al-Muttalib. Abdul Muttalib, who is the grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ. Abdul Muttalib. By this time, Abdul Muttalib says Allahu Akbar with a loud voice. People of Mecca said there's something fishy there. There's something there happening. So they rush to him, they see the well, they say, wow, that's Zam Zam. So they said, we have a share. This is the well of our father Ismail. So we automatically have a share in this. That's an inheritance. Abdul Muttalib says to them, no. So he says, إِنَّ هَذَا لَأَمْرٌ خُصِصْتُ بِهِ دُونَكُمْ. This is something that was given to me specifically, excluding you completely. I was told about this. I was meant to do it. 3 nights or 3 days, I have the same dream and tells me and gives me the exact description where to find it. This is specific for me. I'm not going to give it to you. You have no share. It's all mine. They say, no, you have to give us a share. So there was a dispute. Now they had a habit there. How would they sort out a dispute? They had what they call sorcerers or al-kahana, from kahin. People who deal with magic, they deal with jinn, this kind of hocus pocus, abracadabra stuff, right? The same thing, like Harry Potter, magical spells and so on and so forth. They would go to these people, and these people would play their magic and look into their marble sphere, and then they would figure out the answer. Obviously, these people dealt with jinn. These people dealt with jinn. So they would call their kahana, and they would make a lot of money by abusing people and taking advantage of them. So they said, no, we have to find a judge, someone to judge between us. After disputes, they said, okay, let's go to Kahinatu Bani Sa'd. Kahinatu Bani Sa'd. This is a sorcerer with Banu Sa'd. Banu Sa'd lived in the north of the Arabian Peninsula, around the south of Tabuk today. Okay, she was on the borders of Sham. Now Sham at that time, it was around Tabuk, which is the northern city in Saudi Arabia today. So that was the borders there. So Al-Kahina, or this sorcerer, female sorcerer, lived around that area. So they had to travel from Mecca. You're talking about probably maybe 1,000 kilometers. 1,000 kilometers. They had to travel there in order to sort out or solve these disputes, settle these disputes. So Abdul Muttalib goes with his son Al-Harith and some of his brothers, his close family, as one group, and the other leaders in Mecca, they go as a separate group. But they were sort of traveling together, but still separate. So on the way, it's desert, and it's not like today there's a highway, and you can speed up, you can reach that in a few hours. No, that would be days. And there were no like towns and cities, many towns and cities in the middle on the way, so it was a great danger. It was a great danger actually. If you run out of if you run out of water, you could actually die. You could die in the middle of the desert. And that actually happened with Abdul Muttalib and his group. They run out of water in the middle of the desert. So they said, we can't survive now. The only hope we have is speak with the other group, which was still visible to them. They approached them and they said, can you give us some water? Because we run out of water and we're going to die. They said, sorry, we are also in the middle of the desert. If we share our water with you, that means both of us are going to die. We care about ourselves now. You guys find out a way. find out a way to survive. So Abdul Muttalib with his group, they start consulting with one another. What should we do? What's the best? Go back? Even if you go back, you're going to die on the way. We're in the middle of nowhere. Wherever you go, you're far from everything. Wherever you go, you're going to die on the way. There's no water or well that is close to us, either ahead of us or behind us. Wherever we go, we're stuck. And that shows you that's a lot of disputes where they get people. And that shows where greed leads people. So disputes most of the time don't lead to a good result. They don't lead to a good result. So this is why a lot of competition over dunya and worldly matters, a lot of disputes about this, and people being greedy and being very insistent when it comes to having personal gains and so on and so forth, could actually be problematic. But that doesn't mean you don't ask for your right. No, when you have a right, you ask for it. But you still have to be wise. But you will find people within families, within the same country sometimes, within the same religion, people fight over trivial things. And they pay a hefty price, a very big price for a small gain. It becomes an ego game, right? I'm not gonna compromise. I'm not gonna take a step backward. I'm not gonna leave it for you. So it becomes an issue of pride and ego, and people get stuck. And sometimes this happens as well with, you having a conversation with someone and you say something, you say, no, that's not true. No, it's true. No, it's not true. It's true. You bring evidence, you don't bring it. It becomes an ego thing. It becomes an ego thing. No, I'm right, you're wrong. The other person, no, I'm right, you're wrong. You can't prove to someone in that state anything. You can't prove it. If it becomes a matter of ego, a matter of personal pride, the mind is put on the side. There's no logic here. There is no logic. So anyway, they thought, what can we do? They consulted one another. We're stuck now. What can we do? How can we get out of this? They arrived at one conclusion. They said, you know what? If we die, our bodies will be, lying on the surface of the earth. And that means, beasts, wild animals are gonna eat us. And the Arabs and many cultures actually have this sanctity for the body. No, it should be buried. It should be buried. So they started thinking about what they're gonna do to their bodies when they die. So they said, instead of all of us being eaten, what we can do, we still have some energy now, some calories now. Let's use these calories that we have to dig graves. Each one of us digs their own grave. And then each one of us, we make our graves close to each other. Then each one lies next to their grave or in their graves. When someone dies, the other ones, with the little energy they have, they push some dirt on top of him. Then there remains one person who has buried everyone else, and he remains. If animals eat him, that's fine. One person, gets eaten better than all of us. So that's the best solution they could arrive at. They really sat. They dug their graves, each one sat in their own grave. Then Abdul Muttalib, and it tells you as well sometimes when people are trapped in people without guidance and without connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how crazy people could go. And by the way, this didn't seem crazy to any of them. It made so much sense. And that's the problem with cultures. That's the problem with cultures. When you live in a culture, there's a lot of stupid things any culture has. There's a lot of stupid things. The culture that we live in today. But we are blind to these absurdities. We don't see them. Once you become part of a culture, it's hard to see what's wrong with it. Once you develop personal traits, it's hard to see what's wrong with them. They become blind spots. So for them, now for us looking at that, they say, that's crazy. You guys just wait for death in your graves? But for them it made so much sense in their culture. In their culture. And that shows the influence of people around us. The general society. These are things you have to keep in mind. We don't think freely. Humans, we don't think freely. We don't. A lot of our conclusions, a lot of our convictions, a lot of our beliefs, personal beliefs, a lot of our understandings, a lot of our stereotypes actually come from the people around us or the society. And we never question them. We never question them. But what's the sign of maturity? A person can actually see beyond this. That's when you grow. That's when you see other cultures, you see other times, how they thought, then you can judge your own culture from a distance, so you're not trapped into it. That's a sign of maturity. So these people, because they don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they don't know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very well, they don't believe in Him the right kind of belief, they were thinking about their dead bodies. But then it just dawned on Abdul Muttalib. It dawned on Abdul Muttalib, he just thought, he said, you guys, we're just sitting in our graves waiting. He says, this is هذا عجز. He said, إن هذا العجز. This state of helplessness is inappropriate. If we're going to die, let's die trying to find something. So, come on, let's start moving. We're going to actually start searching for water. Let us die searching for water rather than die in this helpless state. So they decided actually to start searching for water. Abdul Muttalib gets on the back of his horse or camel. As soon as it hits the ground, water comes out from underneath the camel or the horse. It comes out. So when they saw this, they filled their containers, they drank, and they were relieved. Then they approach the other group and they say, you can fill up your containers, and we have just found water here. So they come, they fill up their containers as well. Then they want to resume their journey to that sorcerer, to Al-Kahina. But now the other group they say to Abdul Muttalib, they say, they said, إن الذي أعطاك الماء هنا في الصحراء وفي هذه المفازة لهو الذي أعطاك زمزم. They said, the one who gave you this water in the middle of the desert where it's unexpected to find water, and in this fashion, okay, he's the same one who gave you Zamzam. We don't need to carry on with the journey. We're going to leave it for you. Let's go back to Mecca. That's a strong sign. That's a strong sign for us. We don't want it anymore. So they actually head back to Mecca. And Zamzam, or the ownership of Zamzam, stays with Abdul Muttalib and his family. And this is why they used to offer water to the pilgrims when they came to Mecca. So they go back to Mecca, and Zamzam, as I said, is under the supervision and the ownership of Abdul Muttalib and his children, or his only son. But what is the story of Zamzam? What's the history of Zamzam? The history of Zamzam?
This is about Hajar.
About
she was thinking when when Ismail was crying, and she was trying to find any
excellent,
waters.
excellent, yes.
Safa wal Marwa.
Now, أحسنت. The Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he brought his wife Hajar and his newly born son Ismail. He brought them to Mecca. He brought them to Mecca. And Mecca was, as the Quran describes, بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ. It was sort of a valley. It's not a sharp slope, but it's between hills and two small mountains. And in the middle of that valley, there was Rabwa, small hill, a small hilly area. Tiny, like probably a couple of meters high. And there was Dawha. Dawha is a big tree. In the desert areas you have the trees that spread, like sort of vertical, like they're sort of horizontal. These horizontal trees that spread. This is a Dawha. So there was a tree there, huge tree in the middle. But no one lived there. No one lived in that area. Now previously, historians say that Mecca used to be a small village. But when Tawfan came, the flood at the time of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, the small population of Mecca was obviously destroyed with everyone else, with all of everyone. And afterwards it remained as a barren desert. There was no one to live there. It was on the trade route for caravans. They used to pass by it, but there was no one living there. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, based on the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he brings his wife Hajar and his infant son Ismail. He brings them. He comes from where? Where did Ibrahim alayhi salam live mainly? Palestine and Egypt. Palestine and Egypt. And we say Palestine, by the way, what's called Palestine today was designed in 1917. Palestine is bigger than this. It has a lot to do with Bilad al-Sham. So Palestine was bigger than what we know of Palestine today. Okay, these are political borders, newly political borders. So he lived in that area, around that area. And he reached Iraq. He came from Iraq. He comes from north of Iraq. So Ibrahim, based on the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, brings his Hajar, his wife, and his son Ismail, who was just newly born. He brings them to that area, Mecca. As I said, there's no one there. He leaves them there, and he has one sack of dates and one water container. He travels with Hajar. Once they reach that point, he turns around and he sets off. He leaves. Hajar realizes he's leaving. She turns to him, she says, are you going to leave us here? You're going to leave us in the middle of this desert, in the middle of nowhere, there's no one here. You're going to leave us here? Who are you going to leave us to? He doesn't turn to her. He keeps walking. She asks him a couple of times. He doesn't respond. She realizes it's definitely not his personal decision. Must be a revelation. She knows he's a prophet. There must be a revelation there. So she asks him, Allahu amaraka bihada. Is it Allah that commanded you to do this? Is it a command from Allah? He nods. He doesn't even look at her. He nods. She figures out. She says, إِذَنْ لَا يُضَيِّعُونَ Allah. Allah will never let us go to waste. Allah's going to take care of us. And that shows tawakkul. In the middle of the desert, no provisions, only a little bit of dates and water. She knows, she says with certainty, إِذَنْ لَا يُضَيِّعُونَ Allah. Allah will take care of us. She knows, she says that with certainty. So the thing is, what we see is not the whole story. There is alam al-ghayb. Your provision, a lot of your rizq, your provision, is actually in alam al-ghayb. It hasn't come to you yet. So you shouldn't worry so much about it. You should work towards it, yes, but you shouldn't worry so much about it. You shouldn't worry so much about it. Why? Knowing that Allah is going to take care of that. And just because you don't see it, it doesn't mean it's not there. It doesn't mean it's not there. The solution to your problem, because you can't see it now, it doesn't mean it's not there. Sometimes it's just round the corner. It's just round the corner. And we get desperate, we start using unlawful means to solve our problems, or we create more problems for ourselves. But you don't realize the solution is just coming, it's just on its way. If you just wait. If you just wait. So Hajar alayhi salam was confident that Allah is going to take care of them, so she had no concern. She was drinking from that water, nursing her little boy, and eating from the dates, but she runs out of water. She gets thirsty, the boy gets thirsty, starts screaming. Now the passion or the compassion of a mother now it kicks in. She can't see her son screaming and she has nothing to offer him. So she runs around, she tries to find out if there is any population, any caravan passing by, any nomads, Bedouins, tribes that are moving out that she could actually see. So she goes to this small hill next to where she is, which is a Safa. She goes on top of it and she starts looking around. Maybe there's someone passing by. Maybe there is somebody there. Maybe there's a shepherd that I can just get some water from. Looks around, there's nothing. She rushes to the opposite side, which is Al-Marwa. Okay? She rushes and she holds her dir', okay, her jilbab, her dress. She holds it because she rushes. So she holds it up. Then she rushes to the other one, looks around. She doesn't see anything. So then she goes between them. Probably, I think her thought process was, maybe I missed someone on the other side. Let me go and see. It's the same panic of a mother as well. This does not go against tawakkul, by the way. It doesn't go against tawakkul. And that's sometimes we are very sharp. We take it as black and white. Having tawakkul doesn't mean you have some concern. Just like having rida and pleasure and acceptance of Allah's decree and Allah's qada does not mean you don't experience sadness. That's when the Prophet ﷺ, when his son died, he cried. So one of the companions says, Ya Rasulullah, you're crying? He says, Innaha rahmah, this is mercy. The Prophet ﷺ says, this is mercy that's put in our hearts. Does this mean the Prophet ﷺ was not accepting of Allah's decree? No, he was. So it's not about black and white. It's not about black and white. This is why Fudayl ibn Iyad, when his son died, he laughed. When his son died, he laughed. They said, why you laugh? He said, I'm happy with whatever Allah decreed. Now Imam al-Qayyim criticized this. He says, this is not the right type of being pleased with the decree of Allah, because the Prophet ﷺ was better than Al-Qadi Iyad. He cried. So crying does not go against accepting the qada of Allah and being happy with it. It doesn't go against it. It means you're a human being, you still have this human nature, and you go through your normal human emotions. The same with Hajar. She was a woman, she was concerned for her son. But that doesn't mean she felt Allah is going to leave them. She didn't feel that, but she realized she had to do something. She was acting on her instinct as a mother. That's it. So sometimes we are harsh to judge ourselves or judge others, say you don't have tawakkul, you don't have acceptance, based on human emotions like this. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. So she runs between them 7 times, and the Prophet ﷺ says, وَلِذَلِكَ سَعَ النَّاسِ. And this is why people make sa'i between Safa and Marwa. So it became an act of worship. And it was there from the time of Ibrahim till the time of the Prophet ﷺ, till our times, till the end of time. Sa'i between Safa and Marwa is going to be there as one of the acts of worship and one of the acts of pilgrimage. So when she was in her last bout on Al-Marwa, she hears a cracking sound. She looks around, the water has come out next to her son Ismail. So that small hilly area where the tree is, water comes out. So the Prophet ﷺ says this was the angel. The angel hit the ground with his wing, and Allah caused the water to come out. And that's Zam Zam. That was Zam Zam. So she started taking from that water and filling the container. And the Zam Zam is very special. The Prophet ﷺ says, ماء زمزم طعام طعم وشفاء سقم. The water of Zam Zam could actually substitute food. It's so nutritious that it could substitute food. So it has more nutritional value than normal water. It has much more, okay? Much more. So the chemical composition of Zam Zam water is different. Is different from other types of water. وَشِفَاءُ سُقْمٍ, and it's a remedy. It's a remedy for illnesses and diseases. So the Zam Zam has this. Zam Zam has this capacity. And the Prophet ﷺ said something about the water of Zam Zam. He said, مَاءُ زَمْزَمْ لِمَا شُرِبَ لَهُ. The water of Zam Zam will serve the intention that you drink it for. So for example, this is why it's a sunnah that before you drink Zam Zam, you have an intention that I'm drinking Zam Zam with a wish or with a dua. That you wish from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the intention that Allah grants me this thing. That Allah grants me this thing. So for example, you want... many people use it to memorize Quran. They drink Zam Zam with the intention that Allah makes them memorize the Quran. You can drink it with the intention that Allah gives you a wife. You can. So that Allah gives you the car that you wish for, Maserati, right? Or Ferrari, whatever. Or Allah gives you whatever you wish for. Obviously, so ماء زمزم لما شرب له. This is why, for example, Imam al-Dhahabi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, شربت ماء زمزم بنية أن يجعل الله لي علما في الرجال was it Dhahabi? No, it was Ibn Hajar, sorry, it was Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. He said, شربت ماء زمزم. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, the one who made a commentary on Sahih al-Bukhari, the famous commentary on Sahih al-Bukhari, Fath al-Bari, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. So he said, I drank Zam Zam with the intention that Allah gives me knowledge of hadith and the narrators of hadith as al-Imam al-Dhahabi. As al-Imam al-Dhahabi. And subhanAllah, Allah gave him such a high level of knowledge in that field. So, Zam Zam was there. So Hajar was there for a while, and then there were some Arabs, nomads traveling from Jurhum, a tribe called Jurhum. So they were traveling around, and they know this valley. They've seen some birds hovering over it. Now, you know, Bedouins and people who live in nature, they know how to read traces or these signs. For us, they're meaningless, but for them, they have a lot of meaning. They realize since birds are hovering over that place, there is water. There is water. So they send 2 people to check out. They say, we know this place. There's nobody there. There's no water. Why are birds hovering over it? So they send 2 people to check it out, and they find Hajar and her son, and they find the water. So, you know, nomads are traveling. They try to find a place to settle in. They keep traveling from one place to the other until they find a good place to settle in, depending on the season, on the rain, and so on and so many factors. So they, so when they see it in that state, they say to Hajar, would you allow us to move into this area since there's water? Would you allow us to move into this area? Now Hajar, as the Prophet ﷺ says, she had a liking for people. She was a very sociable person, and she wants that, she doesn't want to stay by herself. So she wants people to live around. So she loved that. But she said, but this well is mine. You guys have no right to it. I give you from it, but you don't have right to it. They said, fine, we agree to this. So Jurhum settled there. Jurhum spoke Arabic. Tribe of Jurhum spoke Arabic. So they settled there. Ismail alayhi salam grows among them. So he learns Arabic.